Welcome to the Business Family Marriage Podcast with Tim Smoyer. This is his personal podcast where he shares what he's learning about growing a 7-figure business while also raising 7 children and deepening his relationship with his wife at the same time. He shares what he's learning, what's worked, what hasn't, what he's trying next to grow a fruitful business, family, and marriage. For more on that today, here's Tim.
What is up, Podience? Good to hang out with you guys here again on another just Saturday chill afternoon. We are in Oklahoma with my in-laws and just came down here to hang out on my father-in-law's farm for a little bit, and we're actually en route down to Dallas, Texas, where I'm hanging out and doing some stuff with a influencer. What do you call it? It's mostly a fan event for influencers who are going to do a lot of meet and greets and stuff, but I'll be hanging out there as well as 2 of the YouTube strategists on my team in the kind of green room area just to shake hands with the influencers, with the talent, and just offer our help and advice and support as they're facing challenges and questions and growing their audience and their businesses and things like that. So But we stopped in Oklahoma for a few days before making the rest of the drive. 14-hour drive, I think it is. Probably like 16 with stops, but making a stop here in Oklahoma for on the way down there. And that should be fun. I'm just hanging out my in-laws' back porch, watching our kids play with Grandma and Grandpa's blocks and toys that they keep in a big bin out here for whenever the grandkids come over. Because, you know, Grandma and Grandpa's toys are always more fun and cooler than yours at home. So you probably hear some of that going on in the background. But, yeah, kind of thinking about some stuff here. I thought I'd talk with you guys in terms of work with our kids and with our employees and the people on our teams. And I've learned this mistake the hard way plenty of times, which is how do you ask someone to do something, whether it's a kid or an employee, and then expect them to get it right every time. And when they don't get it right, well, why don't they get it right, and whose fault is that, and how do you fix it going forward? And these principles apply both to organizational leadership as a business owner, or at least as someone who manages people in a business, as well as it does to, I think, to parenting and how we raise and manage our children and our families and our households, in terms of how do we set them up for success, rather than continually getting frustrated when an employee or a child isn't doing what you expected them to do, to the quality that you expected them to do it. So I had this problem very early on with, we'll talk about business side first. I had this problem early on where I remember my first time to hire a guy. The first hire was actually a CPA, because that business tax money spreadsheet stuff, oh my goodness, that went over my head really quickly. So that was the first hire. But then after that, I had a friend who needed a job, and I was looking for, I had too much on my plate, and I got to get some of this offloaded. So I asked him, I was like, hey, do you know how to edit video? He's like, yeah, kind of. And I was like, okay, well, can you start editing my videos for me? And so he's like, sure, I can edit those. So I gave it to him, and I remember feeling a little bit frustrated because I was spending just as much time going through revisions and watching and giving feedback as I was actually giving him the edit to do. I was like, I wasn't really saving much time. I was kind of spending the same amount of time, but now I was just paying someone to do it. And so all the revisions, I think we go with 6 rounds of revisions on a video before it was finally ready to publish. And then even then I was like, let's just publish it and be done with this one. I wasn't work I was satisfied with. And if you have children, you might have a similar experience. I don't think I'm the only one, where you're like, you know what? It's just going to be easier and faster for me to do this myself than to ask my 5-year-old to do it, or my 3-year-old to do it, or whatever depending on whatever the thing is you're asking or expecting them to do. And so in the business, what I eventually took that back and then I was paying that person $15 an hour to edit, and wasn't getting a great return on that in terms of time. So I then switched to someone who's about $60 an hour, thinking it was going to be way more expensive. But this person actually, instead of taking 6 rounds of revisions and about 6 hours of my time, they had it done, mostly done on the first pass. There was very little revisions needed, if any, from me. And instead of taking like 6 to 8 hours for them to do it, it took them like an hour to an hour and a half to edit the whole thing. And I was like, oh my goodness, this person's actually cheaper and more affordable, I should say, because they're just, and they're worth the $60 an hour instead of $15 an hour. So I guess that's a different principle, that a lesson as well than the one I'm trying to make here. The main point is the difference between the $15 an hour and the $60 hour wasn't just their skill quality, and it wasn't just the amount of money that they were being paid and their efficiency and things like that. All that plays a role into it. But I think one thing that did better with the second editor than I did with the first is I actually said, okay, instead of saying and I kind of set up the first guy for failure, because I was like, here you go, here's my footage, go ahead and edit it. The second person, I was like, I'm going to screen capture myself editing several of these videos. And they were long because it took me like several hours to edit each one. And I said, I'm going to screen capture myself editing several of these. And then I told this person, can you just watch these edits, these screen capture edits of videos of me editing my videos, and just kind of learn what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and how it works and everything like that before you edit. And at first I was like, I didn't want to do it because it means I was going back to editing more. I was going to spend more time editing again. And then I was going to pay someone about 8 hours, 10 hours to sit there and just watch me edit screen capture stuff. It was going to be super boring. And I was like, I don't really have time for this. This is going to be really expensive. I can't afford to do this. But I did it anyway because I was like, this person, I think this might work out better to give someone some direction. And so I think you guys can see where this is heading. Uh-oh. Are you okay, Karis? Oh, you hit yourself on there? Okay. Hold on a second, guys. Okay, back. So I don't remember where I was in the story, but basically the point is that I spent more time and energy and money training the second editor than the first. I gave them like kind of a list of guidelines of here's principles, here's why I cut here, here's why I don't cut there, here's why we're going to make a transition there, I'm going to use text here, and explain some things behind it. And because of that, the next editor, actually she still edits for me today, like 6, 7, 8 years later, forget, something like that. She was much more prepared to edit the videos, and because of that, I think it's part of what contributed to only needing very few revisions, if any at all, for that. And so the principle is, like, I can't just ask someone to do a job without training them to do it first. And this has been coming out for our family in terms of with our kids, because, and this is to my wife's credit actually, because I was getting frustrated with some of our younger kids and like, hey, you should know how to do this. Why don't you know how to do this? Like, you know how to clean your room. You know how to load the dishwasher. You know how to pick up the floor and put your toys away. Like, you know how to feed the cats and do these different things around the house. Why is this not getting done properly? I was getting frustrated with them because I kind of forgotten that, hey, they need to be trained first. So with our older kids, Hannah and Ezekiel, they are, Hannah's almost 12, and Ezekiel's going to be turning 11 later this fall. When they were little, we spent a lot of time training them and unloading the dishwasher with them, loading the dishwasher with them, doing the matching game with the silverware, the clean silverware from the dishwasher into the drawer. And we moved all of our dishes from like the top cabinets to like the lower cabinets, where it'd be easier and more accessible for them to reach them and not only get the dishes but put them away. And so we thought through that. We spent time. But then with our younger kids now, my wife was like, we haven't really done that with them. We're just expecting them to be able to do this work without having trained them first. And I was like, I think you're right, because she's like, we can't hold them accountable to do these things if we haven't first trained them to do them well. I think we might be making some assumptions about what they can actually do and can't do, and how prepared they are to do some of these things and stuff. So I think she's right. So we're kind of going back to the drawing board with our younger kids now and being like, all right, let's make sure we train you how to do these things. We're gonna and so what we're doing right now is my wife is making a list on all the chores that each of the kids are expected to do, and then going back through and saying which ones are they not doing well, and rather just disciplining them for not doing it well, let's go back and actually do it with them and teach them and train them. And yes, it's going to take more time for us, and yes, it's going to be much faster if we had just done it on our own. But the goal here isn't to efficiently get work done. The goal here is to train children who can be fully contributing members of society, and that includes doing good work. And we can set them up to actually enjoy good work and be good at it if we actually take the time to train them. And then in the long run, even for our family, it's more fruitful and more productive, because they'll know how to do the jobs well and do it well the first time. And that makes them feel more confident. That makes them, like, we enjoy things that we do well. Like, if you're bad at math, you probably, like in school, you probably hated that subject. Or if you hated, like, if you weren't, like, science was confusing to you in school, you probably hated that subject, right? We enjoy things that we're good at. And so if we can help our kids be good at doing the work and doing it to a satisfying degree, and they feel confident and proud that they actually did it to a satisfactory standard, then there's a greater chance that they would enjoy the work, and it'd be less of a hassle. And that is absolutely true with our older kids. And, maybe there's some birth order stuff there to consider as well. But the older ones that we did take time to work with and train, they do work, they enjoy work, they do it well, they don't fuss and complain nearly as much about it. And so we're trying to do that with our younger kids. So back to and there's a tool that we're using, which is kind of what I wanted to get to, the whole point of this, for when it comes to doing this with our employees. So one of the things that we are really, really big about in our business now are called SOPs, Standard Operating Procedure. And this is a really big important thing that I had not considered for way too early enough in my business. And I read the book E-Myth. Highly recommend it if you're starting your own business. Very, very important book to read. And got some other things out of that book years ago, but then revisited that book again and like, oh, wow, we really need some good SOPs, Standard Operating Procedure. An SOP is basically a written expectation for this is how this thing should be done, and this is how it works. And it works especially well with very process-driven tasks and things. So, for example, there's a reason why you can go into any McDonald's in the world and get a very similar experience. It's because they get the same type of meat. I'm making this up for right now. I don't really know exactly how it works. But let's say they take the same type of meat. Each patty is the exact same thickness. And it gets cooked on this side for this number of seconds. You flip it over for this number of seconds. And then you put it on the bun or in the microwave or whatever you do with it at McDonald's. And everything is very standardized, right? And so that's why you can have a very predictable experience, because everyone follows the same process in that restaurant. So our businesses need, just not McDonald's, but small businesses need that too. It's not doing lots of custom things. It's doing SOPs, standard operating procedures, for a lot of little things. And so we have that now. In fact, I worked with one guy a couple of years ago now at this point, Grant Thompson, from the King of Random. And he was very in a similar position. He's like, Tim, no one else can edit my videos the way I do. No one else can do this in my business. And I worked with him on and off for a few years. And I think at this time the channel's got like over 10 million subscribers, but back then I think it was closer to like 6 million. And I was like, we have to systematize this stuff, right? Like, you have to get your editing down to a system, a process anyone can follow. And he did. And now he's as a former airline pilot, he like understood this, because he's like, oh, Yeah, like whenever before every takeoff, there's like a whole series of checklists. Before every landing, there's a whole series of checklists you have to go through, just to ensure that this plane is safe, that that everything is going to go exactly. There's going to be a similar experience, like everything is ready to go. Safety checklist, everything. And so we start thinking about thinking about it that way for his video editing. He said. He's unfortunately passed away at this point due to an accident he had. But he said, Tim, I've gotten my editing SOP to a point where I can give this thing to anyone who knows the mechanics of editing, along with my raw footage. And if they follow this checklist, they will give me back a video that is about 100% every single time. I was like, oh my gosh, because this video is pretty involved. I'm like, how long is this thing? He's like, it is 80 some pages long. 80 some freaking pages long. I was like, there's no way. That is detailed, you know? So, but it took him a lot of work to make that on the front end, but the amount of time and work and energy and life it gave to him, to his family on the back end was phenomenal, because he was, instead of working like 80-hour weeks, he could go, he said, Tim, I systematized everything in my business, and instead of working 80 hours a week and ready to quit, he's like, instead now I am working about every Monday and like one day a week, and having the rest of the week off for my family, because now I have a team of people who not only just doing good work, but they're doing it because I've expressed it clearly and outlined it in this checklist, in this SOP. And he's like, thank you, and you helped me get my life back. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so same thing with our children. It's like, you don't have to necessarily write them an SOP, but I know, you know, the kids do need to be trained. Okay, you take the dishes from the dishwasher, they go in this spot in the cabinet. You have to make sure that they're dried off. You know, this is where the silverware goes. This is where these pots go. This, as opposed to like, they kind of get the poles and the plates put away, but don't know where the pots and pans go. And then you're still kind of like a little bit frustrated. So it was going back to doing the training thing. It was like really important with not only the employees, but also with our kids. And so once those are in place, the expectations are clear, then it becomes a little bit easier to hold them to a standard. It's like, no, I trained you, you know how to do this. Then there's a discipline thing, you know, whether it's with employees or with children. You know, you instead of just getting frustrated at them, like in the beginning of my business, I was the blame. Like, it wasn't like this guy wasn't doing a good job editing because he couldn't edit. It was because I didn't set him up well enough to be successful at that. And so it's like, instead of just hiring people or expecting your kids to be like, oh, they should be able to do all this just on their own, it's like it was my fault for not having trained them well enough and set the expectations clearly enough in the very beginning. And so once the training's there, once the SOPs are there, and you know they're trained in it, and you know they can execute it because they've done it before and they've done a good job, and then there's whether it's the employee who's just not doing the work or they're not doing it well, then you can hold them to that higher standard and take the actions that are necessary for that, whether that's giving them more training or usually what happens in my case is like I'll put the SOP together. Some of my team will put that together and we'll give that to them, and then they'll run through it a few times and they'll find all the holes in it, like all the, oh yeah, okay, you got it wrong here, and I can see that because I actually didn't make this part specific enough, or this clear enough, or I just assumed that you would know this part or that part. But you can't assume people would just know something or be able to get it done. You have to spell everything out very, very clearly, and it's better to over communicate than to make assumptions and then be disappointed later. Okay, you could have problems later relationally trying to fix things that you just assume they should know, and they get frustrated with them when they don't, as opposed to setting it up and they're like, I know, Dad, and then you're like, oh, okay, good, all right, let's move past this part. That's a much better approach. So yeah, realizing that a lot of that was my fault, that I had unspoken assumptions for how the task should be done and what it should look like at the end that I didn't communicate. So for example, just telling the kids like, hey, go clean your room. Well, their idea of clean might be very different from mine. And so making it clear, like, this is what the expectation is, this is what a clean room looks like, is a lot different than just being like, hey, go clean your room. Until we talk about it and they know exactly what that means. Like, this has to be cleaned up, this has to be folded, these drawers have to be closed, your bed has to be made, like those types of things. So I don't think we should necessarily write SOPs for our kids unless that makes it easier. Depends on the kid's personality to like have that checklist to go through, so that they can say, yes, my room is clean. I checked everything on this list, right? And I did all of it to the standard that I know that you want it to be done. But I suppose you could do that with your kids. But what we found is that by writing SOPs and then tweaking them over time to keep them accurate, to keep them aligned with people's skills and abilities and the business, whatever, it makes the outcome more predictable and more efficient over time. So yes, it's more work up front for us to train our children, or it's more work up front for me to write the SOP and get the expectations and standards exactly right for our employees. But it saves time and actually aids in better relationships in the long run, because they know that I'm doing a good job, I am meeting the expectation, the standard, and there's less likely to be something come back at me later of like, well, you never said this and I didn't know this, some sort of like unwritten thing that kind of comes at them by surprise, which makes the relationship difficult and makes both employees and kids less likely to want to do work. So this came up even more recently, actually, for this trip that we're on here in Oklahoma. Just asking them to pack their clothes. And so we kind of gave them a list of like, here's what we thought, like, here's what you guys need to make sure you get, like so many pairs of underwear, so many shirts, so many shorts, and old shoes for the farm and stuff like that. And they packed, but then when my wife went back and looked at it, she's like, no, you didn't do this right. You're going to be too hot in that, and this is going to be wrong. And she got frustrated because she had to pack all over for them. And I was like, okay, like that makes sense, but we also didn't really specify clearly enough. Like they kind of did what we told them to do, and we didn't specify enough that no, it needed to be these types of pants and not those pants, and it had to be like this thing and not that thing or whatever, you know. So that's on us as parents, not the kids. Like it's a little unfair to get frustrated from them when that hasn't been clearly communicated and understood by them. So if you've trained them and they've done it successfully a few times, then you can hold them accountable for the performance. But for that situation, we hadn't. So I've just been, thinking a lot that clear expectations, clear standards, even writing them down, just sets everyone else up for better success in the long run. Than leaving. Yes, it's more work up front for us, whether it's in our business, with our employees. Oh, and by the way, I was kind of thinking this while I was talking earlier, just kind of parenthetically, that SOPs do really good, like I said, for process-oriented tasks and things. And ultimately, your business comes down to some sort of process-oriented tasks. But the higher level thinking in terms of like decision-making and ideation and making judgment calls, like I absolutely believe that those can be written into an SOP as well. That more mental work, and I found that it really like comes down to having we talked about this in a previous episode, of like really good, clear core values of knowing like this is what our standards are, this is what we're trying to accomplish, what our mission is, our vision, and our purpose, and these are the values that we use by which we filter all of our decisions through. And so you still can put a process together for making choices and decisions, but that's kind of like a little next level stuff. Most of what I'm talking about here is more for process, task oriented things in terms of like how to respond to emails and which saved reply to use for which type of response, and how the kids should do their chores, and here's one scoop in each of these of cat food in each of these bowls, and this water needs to be filled up to this line with fresh water each day. It's more about those clarity on those process, task oriented things. So looking forward to hearing what you guys are thinking about this, what stands out to you guys. There's a link in the show notes. You can leave a voice message for me. I don't know if it's clickable for you all the time, but you can go down there and just copy paste it if nothing else, because I'm just doing all these for my phone, so I don't know how it shows up for you guys all the time. But yeah, leave a voice message. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to kind of hear more about what you're thinking, what your reactions are, any ideas and thoughts that you have. What's worked well in your family or in your business for training people, setting expectations, and setting them up to do work well, setting them up to succeed, so that expectations are met and they feel good about the work that they're doing. They can see that, like, hey, this is a win. I'm doing a good job here, and improve relationships and all that kind of stuff because of that. So looking forward to hearing you guys' messages, and I think we're about to eat some lunch here. So thanks for hanging out, and we will talk to you guys again next time for another Business Family Marriage podcast episode. See you guys then. Bye.